All right, well, I am going to go ahead and get us started. Again, thank you all for joining us today for the BCHA Go Green webinar on cost savings and sustainable stays, where we are going to provide a refresher and walk you through the 2 free and complementary sustainability programs that are specifically tailored for the accommodation sector. And next slide, please. My name is Angela Nagy, and I'm the President and CEO of GreenStep Solutions, and our team of sustainability experts at GreenSteps helps businesses to measure and reduce their environmental impacts and improve their sustainability performance. And we've partnered, as many of you know, with the BC Hotel Association to support them in delivering the Go Green program and through our Eco Fund program. And next slide, please. I'd now like to introduce Dylan Tomlin, and he is a certified energy manager who spends most of his time working as the energy analyst for the BC Hotel Association and their Go Green program. And he also spends some of his time working as a senior energy advisor at GreenStep, primarily supporting our Eco Fund customers. And next slide, please. And you'll hear from Dylan in just one moment. Now would love to introduce both Vanda and Kira, who are here with us today. Both of these young ladies have been hired by the BC Hotel Association to support Dylan in the coordination and scheduling of the energy assessments through the Go Green program. Their email addresses are here for all of you, so please feel free to reach out to them directly if you are interested in learning more about the Go Green program or scheduling your energy assessment. And I'm now going to turn it over to Dylan to give you a quick refresher of how the BCHA Go Green program works. And then I will introduce our next speaker. So Dylan, I will pass the reins over to you.
Thank you very much, Angela. So the Go Green program, I'm sure some of you have heard of it before, but a quick refresher on what the program is all about. So I will conduct a virtual energy assessment of your property to identify the top opportunities to reduce your energy consumption and lower your utility bills. Part of that analysis involves benchmarking of your property against similar properties in the province or in Canada, so you can compare and track your energy performance on a year-over-year basis. The assessments usually take about an hour and a half to complete, so just an hour and a half of your time to go through that set of questions I go through. And then I guess on top of that, there's no additional cost above and beyond that to participate in the program. Your top opportunities will be highlighted along with any utility or government rebates that are associated with those pieces of equipment or those upgrades. And that'll all come back to you in a report. So you can access it at your leisure, and we're happy to help you and guide you through the process of implementing some of those projects as well. Next slide, please. So Go Green to date. 49 assessments have been booked with BCHA members, with 44 of those assessments that have been completed. Across those 44 assessments, I have identified a total of 3.5 gigawatt hours in potential electricity savings, along with about 60,000 gigajoules in potential natural gas savings. Obviously, that's everything that I've identified bundled into one big bucket, but those numbers are quite large when you kind of break it down. The assessments have led to 5 Fortisbc funded energy studies worth roughly $160,000. Those studies will be fully covered by Fortisbc if the measures that are identified coming out of the energy study are implemented. So, my high-level analysis finds those opportunities, and then we can dive deeper through a Fortisbc energy study to get down to the nitty-gritty to make those decisions on those upgrades. And then further to the energy studies, there have been 10 rebate applications submitted for equipment upgrades. So have identified opportunities, and we already have 10 rebate applications in. So the program benefits, the energy assessments are free to BCHA members. An average 100-room hotel could save up to $20,000 on their electricity and natural gas bills annually if they implement everything that's been identified, and with a potential of reducing their carbon emissions up to 10%. So definitely some financial impacts and some environmental impacts that you could be seeing some positive impacts that you're doing on site. A little bit of a case study here. So it's a resort lighting retrofit. So this is a hotel and resort in the southern interior of BC. They retrofitted all of their lights over to LED, energy efficient LED lights, and are seeing an impressive 345% return on investment. So the total project cost came in just under $20,000, but their annual cost savings are $27,500. Energy savings, just over 200,000 kilowatt hours annually, and the payback period of 3.5 months. So it's a wide variety of lights that were included in this upgrade, from incandescent lights, fluorescent tubes, some compact fluorescents in high bay, high pressure sodium, metal halide lights went to LED, and they're seeing quite a return on investment for that project. So projects like this can come out of the assessments that I conduct. And then the Eco-Fund program, it's a key component to some of the work we do here. It's in partnership with GreenStep. The GreenStep Eco-Fund program basically creates a budget for your accommodation to invest in projects that will cut or reduce energy, water, and waste costs, reduce the carbon footprint, and increase the property value to help you grow your bottom line. All of this at no cost to you. So essentially, a small fee is added to the guest's folio and remitted on a nightly basis. And then that fee builds up over time and is invested back in the property to reduce or to pay for some of these projects that reduce energy and reduce carbon emissions. So participating hotels right now are generating tens of thousands of dollars with their Eco-Fund on an annual basis, with all of that being invested back into their hotel for energy reduction projects. So if you haven't gone through an energy assessment with me to date, please reach out to our team. We'd love to talk with you and identify those opportunities. So you can reach out to our folks on the GoGreen team. Vanda is here, Kira's here. You have their contact information from the previous slide. If you follow us on the website, you'll also get some green team tips of the week. So Vanda and Kira put some great tips together, so you can always get some fresh new ideas from that as well.
Great, thank you so much, Dylan. And just a quick reminder that the energy analyst role is supported through the BC Hotel Association's wonderful partners at Fortisbc, and we really couldn't deliver the GoGreen program without Fortisbc. So thanks very much to Fortis. I'd now like to turn it over to Jordan with FRESCo. And Jordan, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and FRESCo and dive into your presentation.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate that, Angela. So my name's Jordan Fisher. Really happy to be here today, and a big thanks to everyone at BCHA for bringing everybody together today to talk about this. So our topic really is looking at ways to reduce your utility costs as well as your environmental impacts in hotels and motels. And there's certainly a lot here that we'll talk about that's really complementary and in line with everything Dylan went over. So FRESCo is an energy efficiency consulting firm. I'm a senior program manager there. We're basically a team of energy efficiency analysts, design engineers, both mechanical and electrical, professional project managers. I've personally worked in this field for about 16 years. We work in hotels, restaurants, apartments, and a variety of other commercial facilities. And it's been really interesting to see just how much things have changed in the 16 years I've been involved. You know, it used to be that energy efficiency and sustainability were kind of these fringe things that very few people were engaged in, just maybe a few leading companies. And it's just been an explosion over the last couple of years where we've seen this going from this kind of nice to have thing that a handful of people did to really now a core part of the business. And the leaders in that are really doing well now. They're reducing their costs, they're increasing profitability, you know, they're being more attractive to customers. And those that aren't are starting to fall behind. So I think it's great everybody's here today and learn more about these opportunities and how they can be more on board with all these great changes that are happening. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to go over some challenges and opportunities as they relate to buildings and energy efficiency. We'll do sort of a brief 101 on building systems as it relates to efficiency. And then we'll talk about how we evaluate the business case for the upgrade. And actually, Dylan gave a great example from some of the work that he's been involved with. And I'll talk a bit more about different ways that we look at the financials. And then I'll tell you a bit more about some of the free programs and opportunities, particularly with Fortisbc, which has got a lot of great support for the sector. And you've heard a little bit about that already. And I'll tell you a bit more about some of the other opportunities they have. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So let's start by talking about some of the challenges and opportunities. And a lot of the challenges we've been facing relate to increasing costs, taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance. But at the same time, we have some limits to our ability to continuously increase revenue. And obviously this year we've all, or well, 19 months ago, I suppose now, have all had, you know, all these additional challenges related to COVID, obviously both in terms of their impact on revenue, but also just more generally, you know, the massive impact it's had on everyone and certainly for hotels, new health and safety protocols and all that additional work. So we're definitely in a very, very challenging time. And then on the financial side of things, we have these additional challenges where, you know, real estate's very, very expensive. Capitalization rates are low. So we find with a lot of our clients that often focused on growing their profitability by acquiring new property are still trying to do that, but that's actually getting quite challenging. So we're seeing a bit of a shift in focus to let's invest in what we have and how we can improve the properties that we've got. And then there's also just this overarching challenge of a lack of time and a lack of resources where, you know, staff are busy and most organizations don't have a lot of, you know, in-house resources that are really experts on how to tackle these issues. So to put a finer point on these numbers, so these are numbers that look at basically building operating costs in general. This is over about a 9-year period ending in 2018. And what we saw over that period was total operating costs increasing dramatically, much faster than the rate of inflation. Repairs and maintenance at over 15% a year, water rates at over 9%, insurance rates at 8.5%, sewer rates at about 7%, and overall operating costs were increasing at about 7.5% a year. And in fact, I'm just starting to see some numbers from the more recent last few years. And in fact, it looks like that increase is actually even higher now. And I guess there's a lot of question about what it's going to be going forward with inflation. And of course, a lot of question about what are our revenues going to be. And obviously this industry faces, you know, a huge amount of uncertainty and hopefully things are improving now. But there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of increasing costs. Now, the good news is that utility costs are an area where you actually can help to control the costs that you're incurring within your properties. And that's really through investments in energy efficiency and water efficiency. And we really see that as a form of asset renewal. It's a way of protecting your investment by investing in modernizing those assets. They actually tend to have extremely good return on investments. And there's also a lot of, you know, non-financial and non-energy benefits. So whether that's environmental benefits like addressing water shortages or climate change, or other benefits like improving the comfort of our buildings, improving cooling, improving air quality, making them better places, both for our guests as well as for our staff that work in the buildings. So whenever we look at energy efficiency, certainly utility prices are one of the really important factors that we need to account for. Utility prices can be difficult to predict, but we certainly see a general upward trend. And it's not just in energy, but actually water is a very major expenditure. And I think sometimes underestimated how big a role it actually plays within the world of efficiency and utility costs. So you've probably seen lots of headlines over the last few years, rates increasing, for example, with electricity. And besides the things that make the news, like, major dam projects and Site C and things like that, there's billions and billions of dollars of other infrastructure projects and operational costs that the utilities incur. And all of those costs need to get built into rates. And so inevitably, rates, do need to go up over time to account for all of those expenditures. And again, water rates have been going up as well. Water rates vary quite a bit throughout the province. They're typically handled at a local level, usually at a municipal level. And so those costs do vary, but in most places we are seeing those costs go up, and in some cases actually going up faster than energy costs are going up. Natural gas costs have also been going up. You do sometimes see misleading headlines about gas prices increasing dramatically. I won't get into all the complexities of how natural gas prices are structured right now, but certainly natural gas prices had been quite high prior to the 2008 recession. They dropped quite a lot, and they now have been coming back up over the last couple of years. So Fortis was able to actually keep gas prices without an increase in the third quarter of 2021, although we are now also starting to see, not just locally, but all over North America, gas prices are creeping up. And so we are starting to see those costs increase. In addition to those just normal cost increases or cost increases in the price of the utility itself, we also have carbon taxes. So we've had carbon taxes for a while in BC. They were put on pause, or I should say the increase was put on pause during COVID at $40 a ton, but in April that did go up to $45. In 2022, it's going up to $50 per ton. As probably many people have heard, even well before the election, the federal government announced they're actually going to be increasing nationally the carbon tax up to $170 a ton. So basically more than quadrupling what it was just some months ago by 2030. So that's a pretty significant number. And I think a lot of people don't quite realize exactly how big a deal this is and exactly what that means. For those who are familiar with gas pricing, probably a couple of years ago, your total cost of gas was about $8 a gigajoule, including all the taxes and delivery and all those things. And by 2030, this carbon price, just the carbon price itself, will be $8 a gigajoule. So assuming we have no other inflation, no other cost increases of any kind, that would still bring us up to, I believe, a little over $16 a gigajoule from 2030, when just a year or so ago it was only 8. So pretty significant numbers. So let's talk about what we do about this. And so the first thing that we have to talk about is kind of a 101 on building systems and on energy efficiency. So we talk a lot in energy efficiency about energy conservation measures, or what we call ECMs. And they tend to fall in a number of key categories, usually mechanical equipment, controls, water fixtures, lighting, and building enclosures, or sometimes called building envelopes. So I'll talk a little bit about what each of these things are. So the common system types with our mechanical equipment tend to be things like boilers, air conditioning or cooling equipment, water heaters, and then ventilation systems, as well as the controls that control all of these mechanical systems. So I'll give you some examples. Boilers and water heaters, and I guess what I'm saying here also holds largely true for things like swimming pools and hot tubs. We tend to see a lot of buildings that still have quite old technology. And one of the challenges with that technology certainly is that it's lower efficiency. In other words, it turns less of the energy contained within the gas into usable energy. But beyond that, they tend to have a lack of control and a lack of modulation. And without getting overly technical, to explain modulation, if you could imagine if you drove a car that didn't have a gas pedal, it just had a high and a low, or it just had an on and an off. And as you drove down the road, you just turned the engine on and off and on and off in order to accelerate or decelerate. You can imagine that would be kind of hard on your engine, and it would be a pretty inefficient way to drive a car, but that's actually how most of our older mechanical equipment works. And so it's pretty kind of clunky and inefficient, and we don't have a lot of control. So we sometimes end up with buildings a little too hot, and then maybe they're too cold. So newer equipment, modern boilers, which are very, very well-proven technology, not only are more efficient in the sense that they combust more efficiently, they turn most of the energy in the gas into a usable form, they also have much better modulation and much better control. So these don't just go on, off, on, off. Really, they're sort of dialing up and dialing down in order to meet the needs of the building. And then they have controls that are designed to better match the needs of the building with the output of the equipment, so that you're more sort of accurately meeting what the needs of that building is. They're very, very high efficiency. They're theoretically in the high 90s% efficiency. In the real world, we never actually achieve that, but we can typically get somewhere in the low 90s as an actual achievable target. Older equipment, at best might be 80% efficient, and sometimes is only 50% efficient. Now, other than the equipment itself, this is actually a slide from Fortis. I won't go through it in detail, but there's some other things you can do to improve these systems. So one example is hydronic additives. So this is actually a liquid that's put into a hydronic, or basically a hot water-based heating system. And it actually improves the efficiency of heat transfer. And Fortis has actually studied this and analyzed it and found about a 9% savings on average. And so Fortis now actually has some incentives available for this as well. And then on the hot water side, a lot of buildings have hot water that just recirculates continuously through the hot water pipes, which actually uses a lot of energy and can actually put a lot of wear and tear on the pipes themselves. So there's some really smart controls now that actually help control that and basically modify or control that circulation to reduce unnecessary energy use while still enabling really good supply of hot water. And we see some buildings putting this in place, not just for the energy savings, but almost as much out of interest for reducing wear and tear on pipes and reducing the frequency of leaks and other kinds of problems that we can see in buildings. I'll also talk a bit about ventilation. So a lot of the things I said about boilers hold true with older equipment that was sort of on, off, and not as efficient. This newer ventilation equipment also can modulate and be better controlled. So it can really ensure you're continuously getting the right amount of ventilation into your building. There's also some newer equipment that has what we call heat recovery. In other words, it can actually extract the outgoing or heat out of the outgoing exhaust air and use that to safely preheat the incoming air. Now, one of the things we've seen since COVID is that a lot of buildings are trying to increase their ventilation rates as a way to improve air quality as a health and safety measure, which is a very, very good thing to do from a health and safety perspective. Energy managers usually don't like it because it means we use a lot more energy for ventilation. Generally, our view at FRESCo is that health and safety is the most important thing, and we want to ensure we have well-ventilated buildings that have good air quality. And that's especially important right now, but I'd say it's important all of the time. And so, while yes, that does use more energy, that really just increases the importance of ensuring that your equipment is efficient and is well controlled. So you're both getting the right amount of ventilation and you're doing it as efficiently as you reasonably can. Now, not everything's super high-tech equipment. So this is an example from an energy audit that we do, where we actually have engineers go into these buildings and analyze the buildings. And one of the things we see is that we see a lot of kind of just wasted heat and heat loss. So what you're looking at here are actually two photos of the same thing. And the one on the left is a normal photo. The one on the right is an infrared photo. And all the bright areas are showing hot areas, basically areas of heat loss. So this is a really good way of illustrating that even some simple pipe insulation in the right places is a pretty low-tech way of getting some good energy savings. This is equipment probably many of you are familiar with, what we call PTACs, which are pretty much an inefficient way of providing air conditioning and heating, space conditioning into usually hotels. Some other buildings use these as well, but they're primarily used in hotels. And there are some newer versions of these, some of which look very similar to the old style PTACs, but they're actually high efficiency heat pumps. And there's some like you see on the right, which are a different form factor, but basically try to accomplish the same thing and are a very, very efficient way to provide both heating as well as air conditioning. And some of them, this unit on the right, for example, can even integrate really high quality air filtration. So for example, if you have air pollutants or smoke events or things like that, these not only are more efficient, they can actually help further improve air quality in the units. And the new ones also provide a much more comfortable form of heating and air conditioning that makes it much more comfortable for guests. Now, whatever type of mechanical equipment you put in, it's really important that you've got good specifications and good design for that system. One of the challenges is, for one thing, it's very, very common that equipment is not sized correctly. Usually it's oversized. And a lot of people think, man, that's a good thing. You know, I got a good margin of error, but equipment that's oversized actually won't function that well and can actually shorten its life and not perform very well from an efficiency standpoint. So we want to make sure we right size our equipment. We want to make sure we configure it in a way that's efficient, that incorporates redundancy, that incorporates good controls. So design is important for that reason, but also it's really important when you're trying to get competitive quotes from contractors. Very often, people just go to a contractor and say, hey, give me a quote for replacing this system, and don't give them a huge amount of direction. And so contractors come back with all kinds of different quotes for very different systems that are very hard to compare to one another. And it can be hard to evaluate whether you're really getting good value or not. And having a consistent professional design not only helps ensure you get good quality, but it also helps ensure you're not getting bigger equipment than you need. And it makes it so you can more adequately compare contractors and make sure that, even if somebody uses a really great boiler, sometimes maybe they cheap out a little bit on the pumps or the valves or other things that will work initially, but might fail in 3 to 5 years. So this can help sort of head some of those things off at the pass. So building controls. So there's a variety of different types of controls that we can put to control our building systems. The one on the left is sort of a bad joke, and I don't know that this works over Zoom as well, but this is a unfortunately common form of control where somebody's stuck something on the wall of your mechanical room that tells the operator, in the fall, set the temperature at this, and in the winter, set your temperature at that. Not very efficient, not very effective way to control things. In the middle, we've got sort of an older style digital controller that does give you some ability to, modify the output of your equipment and adjust it for weather and things like that. And then on the right, we've got more of a digital control system or direct digital control system. And there's a variety of types of these systems in building automation systems that can really control your equipment, give you remote access into controlling things in the building, alert you when there's malfunctions, help you squeeze the most performance and efficiency out of the building. In practice, most of these are really controlled by people's phones and tablets now, but they're quite powerful. And a caution I'll give is that, you really want control systems that are appropriate for the level of complexity of your building, as well as the level of complexity of the operational management systems of the building. So the joke we used to make that's a bit dated now was that if your building manager's VCR is flashing 12 o'clock, do not buy a high-tech digital control system. I told that really bad joke at a presentation a couple of years ago, and one of the younger members of the audience asked me what a VCR is and made me feel really old. But nonetheless, you really, if you get too complicated a system, you're going to be spending more money on consultants to help you with the system than you're going to get out of savings. So you want to really get the right level of sophistication and complexity to match your building and your organization. Other sort of low-tech things, high efficiency fixtures, shower heads, faucet aerators, even high efficiency toilets. There's a lot of good product out there right now, especially years ago. There was a lot of not very good product that turned a lot of people off of this technology or this type of product. But we've been involved in tens of thousands of installs on these now, and there's actually very, very good equipment out there that actually does perform quite well. We have trouble sometimes finding products that meet the needs of like really, really high-end properties and resorts, but certainly anything in sort of the middle price point, there's some really great equipment available right now. And then laundry equipment, a lot of hotels actually already have pretty good laundry equipment already, but certainly if you don't, more efficient equipment helps reduce electricity use, gas use, as well as water use. So there's a bit of a kind of a triple win there. Now, I imagine many of your properties or some of your properties may have commercial kitchens. And there's quite a variety of commercial kitchen equipment out there. And there's a lot of different levels of efficiency. And Fortis actually has got some really good rebate programs available for griddles and ovens. And there's a whole suite of measures that they have. So these are other opportunities where we can help identify, ways of actually saving energy by putting in some of this more efficient equipment. And last but not least, lighting. So lighting is often the first thing people think about when they think about energy efficiency, and lighting's absolutely great. I think Dylan gave a great example at the start of the presentation of a lighting project he was involved in. They tend to have quite good return on investment. I will say that lighting tends to be a relatively small piece of the energy pie. So most of the energy use in your building, and certainly virtually all of the greenhouse gas emissions in your building, are from heating, hot water, and ventilation. And so we really want to focus on how we can improve those systems is really where we're going to get, the biggest opportunities for improving efficiency and getting those kinds of really reductions that we want to see. So how do we evaluate the business case for all this? So there's a lot of different ways that we can evaluate the business case. You may have seen Dylan talked about a couple of numbers in his. One was the payback period, and I think he also talked about the return on investment. So, we really want to look at our impact on operating costs by putting in place these measures. And there's a whole bunch of financial metrics. I won't go into all the details on them now. Probably many of you are familiar with some of these. ROI, return on investment, IRR, the internal rate of return, sort of one of my favorite financial metrics that really sort of very simply boils down a whole bunch of considerations about how long things last and how much they cost over time into sort of one percentage figure that we can compare to other investments. Net present value. And one of the other things we can look at is also financing. So some people will choose to finance capital costs, finance upgrades if they don't have the capital to undertake them, or may just choose to finance them for other reasons. And there's some pretty competitive financing available right now. And so this graph you see is an example from a project that we did where someone was looking at financing. And this top line is the savings that you get from the project. And it's sloped upwards because as energy prices increase over time, the value of saving energy goes up. And in this case, we looked at using fixed interest rate, fixed term financing to fund this project. And really what you can see from the graph is that even in day one, the savings that the project realizes is more than the cost of financing, including both the principal and the interest. So you're actually not putting up capital, but getting a net savings from day one. But as time goes on, because the financing cost is fixed, your net savings, the difference between your savings and your cost of financing is growing. And once the loan is paid off, now it actually goes up dramatically and it's all gravy from here on in. So that's one thing that people can consider when they're looking at how to evaluate this and also how to fund some of these projects. And again, we also want to support the Eco Fund that BCHA has. We think it's a great opportunity and really a great way for building owners and building managers to really start sort of dedicating and planning towards replacing capital projects over time. Now, with any investment, you want to manage risk, and that really comes down to choosing the right kinds of measures, ensure you have good analysis on those and choosing the right kinds of products, as well as the right contractors to carry out those projects. We try to avoid too much complexity. Sometimes in my earlier part of my career, I was involved in a lot of very complicated new construction projects. And one of the things we learned from that experience is a lot of those really complex systems that engineers love and look great on paper often are just too difficult to manage and don't end up performing. So we really want to, similar to what I talked about in the controls, we want our system complexity to make sense for our building and not be more complex than it needs to be. And we also want to think about what is the role that a facility manager or a property manager plays and what kind of professional support can we get them, not only to take work off their plate, but also help ensure that they get a really successful project. So I'm going to talk now about some of the programs and opportunities that specifically can help hotel properties. It can help complement some of those opportunities that you heard about earlier from the GoGreen initiative. So one is what's called the Fortis RAP program. So the Fortis RAP program was originally created for apartment buildings, but it was expanded to include hotels. So that's why you see these things like apartment still in the URLs there. So I apologize for that. We're working on getting those updated. So this is a Fortisbc program, and FRESCo, our company, basically operates this program on behalf of Fortisbc. And what the program includes is a few components. So you start by applying for the program, and we have people who will help you with that whole application process to make it really smooth. And once you're in, they'll help in scheduling the three main components of the program. So the first, which I'll talk about in a minute, is direct installation of efficient shower heads and aerators. The second is having engineers actually do energy audits and energy analysis, a little bit similar to what Dylan had spoken about earlier. These are done by professional engineers. We're not doing these virtually for the most part. We can if necessary, but we're actually coming into the buildings and actually analyzing the systems and doing a pretty solid analysis on the building. And if you are also working with Dylan or with the GoGreen team, we can also collaborate with them and really sort of complement all the attributes of that program, which is also funded by Fortis, with this program, which is a Fortis program, to get you the most value and the most bang for your buck. And then the last part, which is implementation support, which I'll talk more about in a few slides. So the first is pretty simple, and that's replacing older shower heads and aerators with more efficient, more modern, newer shower heads and aerators. Just that alone saves typically about 12% of the natural gas use in your building. So it's pretty significant, and of course saves huge amounts of water as well. From there, we've got the engineering assessment done by the energy assessment done by the engineers. And that basically outlines different opportunities, the incentives available, the savings that are available, and the expected return on investment. Now, we also have an engineer follow up with you so they can answer any questions, talk about the kinds of measures, what they found in your building, and sort of help give you some guidance on that process. There's some other slides of some examples of what you'd get in that report, a breakdown of how your building uses energy and where that energy comes from, examples of your equipment and sort of illustrations of sort of old and new equipment and what kinds of things you can upgrade. And we can have engineers speak to you about sort of the advantages or disadvantages of those options. Now, if you decide we do want to move forward and actually implement this, one of the really unique things about the implementation support program with RAP, quite unique really in North America, is this level of implementation support where Fortis will actually provide professional engineers, or through our company, both mechanical and electrical engineers, who can develop specifications, help you in getting quotes with contractors and discussing technical details with contractors, getting those quotes, assembling those into a business case, as well as actually not just applying for the rebates, but because it's a Fortis program, we can actually directly put in all the rebate information into Fortis's system, not just sort of filling out a form. So we actually have direct access into the back-end system to actually help get those rebates and ensure everything goes smoothly. And the engineers will also review the installations and identify if they find anything that doesn't meet the specification that went out. So this is similar to what you might if you've ever hired consulting firms or engineering firms to help you with this sort of process. It's typically, in the range of at least several $1,000s, and Fortis actually pays for this as part of this program. So it's a pretty awesome benefit. And again, we can absolutely collaborate with Dylan and the BCHA team on anything that you may be working on with them. So some examples. So there's been over 1,000 buildings that have been in this program, over 40,000 units. These numbers are a little bit outdated. It's actually well over $1 million in savings that have actually been achieved, not just potential. There's I'll skip all the gigajoules and that kind of thing, but there's 260 million liters of water per year are already being saved through the program. That's about the same as 100 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or about running a shower 24 hours a day for about 100 years. So that's pretty remarkable. And there's also been 14,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reduced. So pretty awesome. For reference, sort of average municipality would tell you that sort of the average community emissions work out to, depending on where you live, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 tons per person. So pretty significant achievement that the program's had. And there's been a 91% satisfaction rate of participants in the program. So it's been quite successful. And we're really excited over the last, I guess now, a couple of years to have been able to include hotels within that program and be able to get them all these additional value that previously wasn't available. So if you're interested in that program, you can sign up. There's the website and the email addresses here. You can use either of those email addresses. The top one's the actual Fortis address. Those will get forwarded automatically to us, or Wendy Mahoney, one of our team members whose email address is here. Wendy's awesome. She's our outreach and engagement coordinator, and she really helps with getting people into the program, helping them with the application paperwork, and then connecting people with engineers or other technical resources that that folks may need. We have some new things that Fortis has added. So there's a bunch more rebates that Fortis has added recently, some of which I touched on briefly, and there's more I don't have time to get into. Lots of great rebates that Fortis is offering. Fortis is also now giving a gift card to all of the participants in the program. And that's really kind of as a thank you, especially for managers or people that are, putting time in to meet with us and show people around the building and go through this process and meet with the engineers. We realize it does take time and folks are busy. So this is kind of a thank you from Fortis that helps, thank the staff for that time that's put in. And as again, of course, hotels and motels are now eligible for the program. There are some other programs that Fortis has that you might be interested in as well. There's one called the Commercial Energy Assessment Program. So this targets a variety of commercial buildings or commercial businesses and includes hotel and accommodation businesses. It is somewhat similar to RAP. It includes this no-cost energy assessment and implementation support options, as well as incentives for the upgrades. It does not include the shower head and aerators, and it's not quite the same where there's quite the same level of sort of we do actually help deliver the energy assessments and implementation support for the program. It's not quite as much sort of end-to-end support in the same way with RAP, where we're also helping with the enrollment process and all of that. But it's a really, really great program. And if you're not sure, which one is better for me, they're both great programs depending on what your needs are. But we're intimately familiar with both programs, and we can help you figure out, which program's a better fit and help you with getting into the one that's right for you. Now, there's some other programs. Dylan actually touched on one. He didn't use this term, but I believe he was referring to Fortis Custom Program. And the Custom Program goes even farther with much more in-depth energy and engineering analysis. We also do this work in the custom programs. And then Fortis will come up with a customized rebate specific to your building. There's, as I mentioned, a variety of what we call prescriptive rebates. So prescriptive means basically by this piece of equipment, you get this rebate, versus custom, where the rebate is really customized based on your needs. Now, the one thing I'll say about the custom program is that the custom program really is designed for larger customers, larger facilities, or maybe a large portfolio of facilities. So it's not the right fit for everybody, but if you do have a large facility or a large portfolio, it can be a really, really great program, and you can get fully funded studies as well as, in some cases, very massive incentives. There's also a lot of pilots that Fortis runs, and often participants that get into the RAP program, once they're in that program, some of those participants will have opportunities to participate in pilots. So once you're kind of in the system, then it's easier, once we've seen the buildings and Fortis knows the buildings, that we can identify buildings that might participate in a pilot. So for example, Fortis might be considering offering a rebate on a piece of equipment, but before they do that, they want to kind of run a test, and they'll usually very heavily fund, in some cases provide 100% funding for those pilots. We've been involved in lots of them for ventilation and controls and different kinds of heating equipment. And so, we can be in touch and help you find out when those opportunities arise and help get you those opportunities. Fortis is always coming out with new kinds of programs and new opportunities, and it is changing quite rapidly. So we try to stay on top of all of those things. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the different programs that are available to you and technical opportunities that are available to you. And as I said, we really love the collaboration that we've got with BCHA and with the GoGreen program. I think it's really great that there now finally is so much support for the sector in addressing energy efficiency and climate change and sustainability issues, and really grateful for BCHA for all the leadership that they've shown, and for Dylan and his team, and Angela and their teams for all the great work that they're doing. So with that, I will say thank you very much. I think we may have a few questions here. So yeah, happy to stay and chat and answer any questions you may have. So thanks very much. And Angela, I will turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Jordan. We did have a few questions come in advance of the webinar, so I'll review those first, and then a few others that have come in. So one question, you did mention, significant water savings through the RAP program, but there was a question from a larger property that's landscaped. It's primarily xeriscaping, but they also have a spa on the property, which requires a lot of water. What are some of the projects that could be supported either through the programs that you're offering? And Dylan, you could certainly address this as well, that could help a larger property with a spa on site to reduce both energy and water.
Yeah, great question. Dylan, do you want me to take this one, or do you want to?
Sure, you can start.
Yeah, sure. So some of our engineers actually have done quite a bit of work in this space of looking at spas. Spas are obviously very intensive facilities in their use of both energy and water. I would say, especially if it's a large spa, this can be a good fit for like a customized study, because it's a bit of a unique application, and each spa is quite different in sort of how it operates. There's different things where we look at, not just more efficient equipment for heating, but also the way you control humidity levels. There's a bunch of things in there that actually can impact both the water usage as well as the energy usage. But because it's quite unique, often those kinds of strategies best fit within a customized setting. So certainly if you were in the RAP program, we would look at those and certainly make some recommendations, and where we can identify specific equipment and specific control strategies, we would do that, as well as estimating the savings and then identifying the rebates. But if it's a big spa or more complex, we'd probably think you might want to look at a custom project. And then basically Fortis then, rather than saying, okay, this piece of equipment gets this and this piece of equipment gets that, they're going to look at the project and they're going to say, if you do this bundle of things, we're going to customize a rebate. And those customized rebates can actually be quite large. Dylan, if you want to add anything.
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question from a remote lodge and campground that runs on a natural gas generator, which is, I guess, an interesting opportunity because they're running a natural gas generator to produce electricity. So they're always interested in ways that they can reduce their natural gas bill. Interested in what you might suggest would be best for them. And maybe Dylan, you can address this one.
Yeah, definitely going through an assessment to see what current equipment is in place is probably the first step. Typically there is low-hanging fruit available to go after first, to start getting some returns on those investments and seeing your consumption go down. So I'm happy to meet with you and go through that. And through our conversations, we can also talk about some low cost, no cost opportunities that you could also start implementing to reduce that consumption. Once you start getting the low hanging fruit identified, then we can look at the bigger projects or the longer term projects and plan towards the future as well.
Great, thank you. A few other questions that had come in, just generally interested in what initiatives are available and programs. So I think we've done a great job in addressing those, and also another business that needed a review of their savings opportunities with regards to utilities. So I think the GoGreen program is an excellent start. And of course, then organizations can be referred into other programs. Of course, the RAP program is also a potential start, and these programs all work together ultimately to support the industry in reducing emissions. Some of the other questions that came through, maybe Jordan, you want to address this one. How can a utility give away all these free assessments, support, shower heads, rebates, etc.? It seems too good to be true. What's the catch? It's always a great question. Yeah, great question. So without getting into the very exciting world of utility regulatory policy, in basic terms, I think a lot of people probably would think that the way utilities work, the way most businesses work is, they supply you a product, they buy whatever inputs they need to produce that, they mark up the price, and then they sell it to you, and then they earn a profit. It's actually not exactly how utilities work, or these regulated utilities work. So really, a utility like Fortis actually buys gas and sells it to you for exactly what it costs them. But the way they make their money is that it costs a certain amount of money to get that gas to you. They got to, build and operate all this infrastructure to do that and run their organization. And they're basically allowed charging a fixed rate of return. Basically, they mark up that cost
of getting you the gas. So whether you use 1 gigajoule more or 1 gigajoule less of gas doesn't really matter that much to Fortis. And because they're earning the rate of return on basically operating and owning all of that infrastructure. So with the regulator, who's basically an arm of the government, and his job it is to help protect ratepayers, basically protect, you know, everybody who buys utilities, all the customers, is to say, well, it's good for customers to be more efficient. So if Fortis or any utility spends money on helping customers be more efficient, we're going to allow Fortis to bring the costs of those programs into their rate structure where they earn a rate of return on those costs. So it's not so much that these programs are free, it's that the millions and millions, in fact, tens of millions of dollars, soon to be over, I believe, $100 million that Fortis is spending on energy conservation, really everybody is paying for through their rates. So another way to think of it is, it's not so much that it's free as it is that you're paying for it anyway. So you're either going to pay for it anyway and get the benefit of it, or you're going to pay for it anyway and somebody else is going to get the benefit of it. So the more you can take advantage of RAP or GoGreen or any of these initiatives, the more you're going to get the value that they're offering. And the regulator only allows them to spend that because then you think, well, why don't they just spend billions of dollars on this stuff? And the reason is that the regulator says, well, the utility can only spend that money and build it into the rates for things that are actually cost effective. So all of these programs have gone through a tremendous amount of analysis to figure out that they really are saving people enough energy to be worth it, that it gets built into rates. So anyway, I hope that's a reasonably simple version of a very boring, complicated regulatory topic.
Great, thanks, Jordan. I think some of the other ways that I've heard it framed also include the fact that it's really expensive to build new capacity. So we think about Site C coming on and how expensive that has been. It can be more cost effective for the utilities to actually help you conserve energy, to help postpone the need to build new infrastructure, which ends up helping the utility save on those capital costs, at least in the short term, until the demand exceeds capacity to the point that they need to actually build some more capacity. Okay, so let's see here. Question for Dylan. I'm an operator who is struggling to pay my bills and I can't invest in major changes right now. However, I would like to be more sustainable. What would you recommend? Would I be a good candidate for EcoFund?
Definitely. I think the EcoFund is good for any operator. Obviously, if you're a smaller hotel or property, it will take a bit longer for that EcoFund to gain volume. But once it is been filled up, you can use it to invest back in to reduce those operating costs, those electrical bills or natural gas bills or propane bills or whatever makes the most sense. As for not being able to invest into those capital projects, through our discussions, we can definitely talk about, like I said, the low cost, no cost options on ways to reduce that consumption, just through how the building is operated. I often look at the controls within a property, and oftentimes the set points may be not controlled, and we can work together to find out what's the most efficient way to operate that property.
Great, thank you. Another question, just in general, and I can open this up to both of you, but what are some of the more common and perhaps less common ways to conserve natural gas?
Do you want to start, or?
You can dive into that one.
Sure. So I would say probably the most common, in building on sort of the last question about sort of the not having major capital to invest, replacing your fixtures with higher efficiency fixtures, which in the RAP program is 100% funded, paid for by Fortis, is a really great way that gets you typically about a 12% gas saving right off the bat. So that's a great way for sort of a simple low-hanging fruit. Certainly Dylan talked about controls, and I totally echo what he says on that. And I would say the next most common realistically is going to be your heating system. And probably after that, I would say either, depending on your building, either your ventilation system or your hot water system. Those are really the main ways, is to basically put in place efficient equipment with relatively simple but good quality controls And I think if you do that, you're really going to most simply target your opportunities for gas savings. There are more complex and bigger opportunities, redoing the entire building, cladding and windows, and which are all great things to do to modernize buildings, but are very, very expensive and typically bigger, longer term capital projects that you'd usually probably do, in conjunction with other reasons, cosmetic upgrades or replacing, buildings that have water ingress problems or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Dylan, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that the Jordan touched on one of the measures that Fortis provides some incentives on, or some rebates on earlier, with regards to the additives to the hot water system. It's more of an affordable option, and you can see some pretty good savings on the natural gas side with that. Some controls on pumps that recirculate water throughout the property. Another one that's a simple measure that can see pretty good returns. So, for me, it's the hot water and heating is where you're going to see that natural gas reduction. Great.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the other questions, was some quick fixes on conserving water. And I think those same fixtures, low flow shower heads, faucet aerators, low flow spray valves, and even toilets. Toilets won't save you on the energy per se, but certainly on the water, and the other things are relatively low cost things that can be done, or free if you are participating in the RAP program. There you can access some pre-replacements there. And then let's see here, we've got a few minutes, 3 minutes left. Just one question. The problem I face when updating any equipment is I don't have enough information on how to dispose of my old equipment without them ending up in the landfill. What do you do in this case? And maybe this is a great one for you, Jordan, because you're pulling out lots of old equipment. Sure. How do you make sure that that's responsibly disposed of?
So we generally basically make that part of the scope for the contractor that is putting in the replacement equipment. They're really the ones that are best positioned, that are having to do this all the time. They're pulling out, it's not just your piece of equipment. You had 50 pieces of equipment that month that they had to dispose of. And so that allows them to actually, pull that equipment out, bring it back to their yards. And it's really something that I think, for any major piece of equipment that is really something you want to have a good quality professional contractor that's experienced in your local area, that understands where to dispose of things. And there's a whole bunch of, practices that we're all supposed to follow in how we dispose of things, just like computers and everything else. And really the contractors are the ones that should know that. And so I think it's great to be thinking about those things. And I think it's an excellent thing to talk with contractors about when you're in that process where, for us, where we're actually developing a scope of work and specifications. And even just when you're talking to contractors or interviewing contractors that you may want to hire, to really get that information from them and make sure that you've got someone who really is doing that. But it really is a professional responsibility. And I think it's something that you as an individual operator probably shouldn't be handling.
Great, thank you. And I know Fortis will often, if those direct contracts, they require that the contractors properly recycle and dispose of those products. They don't really want them getting back into market because they're inefficient, but there are certainly places for old lighting and old fixtures to go to ensure that they don't end up in the landfill. All right, well, I think we are at our time now. Just want to thank Jordan and Dylan for your excellent presentations. And again, to all of the participants and attendees that have watched the live presentation and who may catch the recorded version of the presentation, please feel free to reach out to the GoGreen team through the BCHA or to FRESCo directly to learn more about these programs and how your properties can benefit from them. And with that, we will let you go for the day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.